Here we go. We're cruising through the summer. That means we're getting closer to the Washington NFL football team, but we're going to be talking about that. We have plenty to talk about this week in the WTOP Huddle with Chris Cichon, who is already ready for training camp. As I look at him sleeveless, showing off his guns. If you put me and Dave Preston together, we still couldn't match one of his biceps. Dave Preston's with us. And of course, always smiling is Rob Woodfork. And I think we should be smiling. Our first topic this week is Wes Unseld Jr. Welcome home. It's a reason to smile, and this was not about having a good press conference and welcoming a family name. I'll be the last to speak on this because I've known him since he was Little Wes, and you can get away with calling him Little Wes. It's a terrific hire on so many levels. Rob Woodfork, you were smiling first. We'll go to you first. Is Wes Unseld Jr. now in charge of the Wizards?
Well, I have two full thoughts on it. I like the hire from the standpoint that people have been saying chapter and verse how he's a terrific defensive coach and how he's so good at developing young talent. And those are two areas in which the Wizards have been deficient for the better part of 2 decades now. So, I'll leave you guys to discuss that a little bit further. The first thing that I thought of was I didn't realize how long he had been basically earning his dues. He's been in the league as a scout or an assistant coach for the better part of 20 years.
24 years, yeah.
Well, yeah, more than 20 years. So he's more than paid his dues. And to me, it's notable that because he has a legacy name and he had to wait this long to get a head coaching opportunity, this just furthers, the notion that Black coaches in this league don't get the same opportunities as some of the white coaches. Now, I compared his resume to that of his predecessor, Scott Brooks. Scott Brooks only had to wait 8 years out of being a player to get his first head coaching opportunity. So, better late than never. I'm going to give them credit for making a good hire. It's not just because his name is Wes Unseld that he's getting this job. By all accounts, this is a guy that, everybody in Denver and every other stop that he's been along, they sing his praises. They say that he's everything basically the Wizards need at this particular point in time. So I look forward to seeing if he can, number one, he was very complimentary of Denny Avdia. He was very complimentary of Rui Hachimura. If he can develop those players and also get on the same page with Bradley Beal and Russell Westbrook and hopefully keep Beal here for the long term, those are going to be the challenges that await him. So I'm looking forward to seeing what he can do. We all know that there's only a handful of coaches that can be difference makers in the NBA. So if he can be one of those difference making coaches, it could really shift the culture here.
You mentioned it is significant as this offseason. 7 of the 8 coaching hires in the NBA went to Black coaches now, but I also to the Washington franchise and specifically Abe Pollin. I think it as you mentioned that it's worth mentioning that he hired Casey Jones in 1973,
right?
And so you needed more Abe Pollins leading the way, and not
Washington that's never been a problem in Washington, right. But it has been a problem throughout the league. There have been some guys that. And I'm not saying that Scott Brooks doesn't deserve an opportunity. I'm just saying that comparatively speaking, in terms of paying dues and being in the league a long time and coming up the ranks, certainly Wes had to wait a lot longer than Scott did.
And Scott Brooks, there's a case of a guy that deserved that next opportunity based on what he did in Oklahoma City, because sure. I witnessed the growth of that program because, sure. Kevin Durant James Harden was not always James Harden, et cetera, et cetera. But I think there's cases where there's coaches getting second and third chances. You're thinking, well, that's kind of curious. Maybe they didn't deserve it. We're getting off topic, which we always do when I'm running the show because I've got attention deficit. Dave Preston, Wes Unseld Jr. comes back home.
Looking big picture and small picture, we'll go big picture first. Rob brings up some great points. I think there's a bias again. There's always been a bias in the NBA and in basketball to have a former guard as a head coach, as opposed to a big man. You look at Patrick Ewing, who perhaps deserved an opportunity in the NBA. I think there's a bias against big men. I remember when they replaced Doug Collins with Phil Jackson with the Bulls way back when, and it's like, ooh, I don't know about that. He's a forward. Can he actually lead? Yes, he can. I think there's also a bias against sons and legacies of guys, especially non-players. So I think there was maybe a bit of a reluctance to promote Wes Jr. further along earlier in his career. And I I think it's a decent hire. Just looking at the small picture, I think he needs to come in and make an impact by not only getting the most out of the guys like Rui and Denny, but also being able to work with the framework that is Russell Westbrook and Bradley Beal. He has a great opportunity ahead of him. He's got to get these guys to play defense for 48 minutes, and that's going to be the difference. If he can do that, this will be a winning team. Hopefully, you never know. This could be a 50-win regular season team, the likes of which we haven't seen since 1979. This could potentially be a Final Four team when you look at how strong or how weak the Eastern Conference might be this next season. And that's not something that we've had since 1979. So I'm excited about the hire. One never knows, though. One always looks at the glass half full, and very often with these new hires, and you look around the league, the glass becomes half empty sooner rather than later. But I'm hoping, and I've got my faith in Wes Unseld Jr. I think it's a decent hire for the team, and I'm looking forward to next season.
And your optimism is not based with that fact. This is a playoff team he's coming into. Granted, it was a late run, et cetera, et cetera. And if it gets healthier next year, you're not coming into a situation where it's a 10-win team or 20-win team, whatever. All right, Cichon, go. You're without sleeves. I know you're bursting with passion and energy on this.
Yeah, and when I go head up to Towson, I'll drive by Loyola Blakefield High School, where our man Wes Unseld Jr. attended, and he is a local guy, so everybody's been talking about. I think for that's very good, knowing connections, being able to, especially in this area, right? Like just growing basketball passion, making this a destination. I remember when Kevin Durant was a free agent, and it really wasn't talked about. Yeah, there was some chatter among us like, oh, maybe Kevin Durant would come home. But like, this wasn't a destination for an NBA free agent to come. At least it didn't feel like it, one of the hot spots. And I think Unseld Jr. brings that to the table, that a guy who comes in might say, I want to come to Washington and learn how to not only play, because Denver was not only just good defensively, they obviously were good offensively. I think the number was like 5th in the Western Conference in defensive efficiency and right around the top 10 mark in terms of overall league. So, and this guy been personnel scout since 2005. I mean, just been in the game for such a long time. I think there's something to be said about that. I mean, Eric Spoelstra comes to mind too for the Miami Heat, getting his start in the video room and working his way up to becoming head coach. I'm happy he was the favorite going into it. I was happy that they decided to go this route as opposed to maybe going with a lesser known guy. The trend these days is really to go like the NBA player who just retires, right? And immediately steps into the role of head coach. We saw that with Chauncey Billups. I mean, I don't know if that's the right move or not, but I like that Wes has paid his dues and is now getting the opportunity.
Well, make no mistake, he's paid his dues, because I remember when he would sit and have meals with me at training camp. So he's having meals with me, because it's like at Thanksgiving, you would sit. I was at one of the little kids' table while he was at that point still a basketball intern or scout or what have you. But this is just a tremendous move by the Washington Wizards franchise, and I believe you will see improvement on a defensive end, because he does have the ability. It's been proven to connect with players, and I think where that comes from is that there are no bad coaches in the NBA. Everyone's got, the same scouts and the same schemes or variations of the schemes, or the ball is still round, the hoop is still 10 feet high. They all know it. They all know it. It's, can you get your players to execute it on the floor? And that's what separates coaches and turns average coaches into very successful coaches, because they can reach the players. And I don't mean with rah-rah speeches, it's just how you convey the message. And this is where we talked about Wes Unseld paying his dues for 24 years. I really think he's 40 years in the making. Imagine this, Wes Unseld going to games with his dad at 5. And so at the age of 5, he's beginning what a classroom. And you're just a kid in the locker room, and there's Dave Bing over there. Oh, there's Phil Chenier. And as he continued to get older, as he shared with me yesterday, he would actually see what his father, who was coaching, this is later on in his career, what he would talk with his staff about, and then actually how they would then deliver that message to the player. And it was often a different conversation, because what is talked about in one room is delivered in another way. So he has this from every angle, from the film, from the scouting, and what is he continuing to draw upon from all those car rides home with your dad, who is a Hall of Fame player? Who else of an NBA coach grew up driving to and from games with a Hall of Fame player? I don't know. I don't know if there's a list there, but if it's a very small list. And I think that's significant. And also, I think that the Unseld name does mean something, because Wes Unseld Sr. will always be one of the finest human beings I've ever run into. The stories are true. His rookie year in 1968, they're not making that much money, and he starts adopting families in Baltimore and providing Christmases. And again, he did this up, and maybe the family's still doing this. I don't know. You won't know, because the Unseld way was not, hey, look at me. I'm doing this for the community. I'm doing that. And as the press conference was going on Monday, is Wes Unseld Sr.'s wonderful wife, Connie, who is still to this day running the Unseld School because of the commitment to education. Another short list Wes Unseld Jr. has to be on. How many head coaches went to Johns Hopkins? So he excelled in the classroom, on the court, and like his father, I would say he's one of the finest human beings you're ever going to run into, because, and I think that's how he can relate to players, because yes, he has the knowledge, the basketball knowledge and the elite basketball knowledge, but it's a family also very in touch with the community and helping people not as fortunate as them. And so then you understand the personalities you're dealing with are different. And that's how how you manage a successful workplace. You're dealing with different personalities. So he knows the X's and O's. He grew up with his dad, watching in the basement video. He's got all that. I have no trouble knowing that he'll be able to execute that. But what really excites me about Wes Unseld Jr. is the person Wes Unseld Jr., because I believe he knows how to convey a message with conviction, class, and character, which is defined Wes Unseld Jr. So I think this is going to be a special hire. This and I also believe in, there's something special about this. A year ago, we said goodbye to Wes Unseld Sr., and a year later, he's back in town and reunited with his family. So that's pretty special as well. So
Dave, two things on, two more things on Wes Jr. to cap things up. I think one of the first things that he realized watching games with his dad was, oh my goodness, there's a septuagenarian playing. And no, that's Tom McMillan. His hair goes gray naturally. Two, if there has been, I guess, talk about a legacy hire, and if that's the case, so what? Aaron Boone got a job much quicker than he should have as New York Yankees manager. Kyle Shanahan was promoted far above his abilities multiple times in the NFL. So what's fair is fair. If certain people can get a legacy hire, after 24 years of working through the system, if this is a legacy hire, so be it. I think he's earned his spot on the Wizards bench as the head coach.
Well, as Phil Shader shared with me that, Wes was talking to Phil, Wes Sr. was talking to Phil and saying that he's thinking about graduate school, but he might want to give his basketball a try, and I'll help him get started. But I'm not going to give any shortcuts. And as Phil laughed, he said, I can only imagine Wes Sr. was harder than anything on his own son. So to get to this point, there were no shortcuts taken by Wes Unseld Jr. It's just a wonderful story. He stayed with it and stayed determined, and I think it gives us reason to root for him. The Nationals, I think I'll just start up the conversation that let's just continue to ride the wave until it's like musical chairs, until they say stop, because when they lose by 3 touchdowns or whatever they lost to the other night to the Padres right after the All-Star break, I'm thinking, all right, that's it. The fun's over. And then John Lester the other night pitches 7 scoreless innings because he stopped thinking about pitching. And I've always said thinking gets you in trouble. So he had the All-Star break, clear his mind. I think the one thing we take away from this team is no matter who's injured, who's not, the minute you want to count them out, they come back and say, aha, we're still here. Rob?
Yeah, and a big reason for that, I feel like I said this maybe last week, they will go as Juan Soto goes. I had a feeling he was going to have a hot streak coming out of the break, and that's exactly what's happened. I'm not going to sit up here and act like I was going to predict 10 hits and 5 home runs in a 4-game span, but this is what they need from him. They need him to get hot, Schwarber-like, especially while Schwarber is still out of the lineup. So, they got to get the bats going. I mean, it was really disheartening to see the Padres hang 40 on them over the course of the 3-game series because, pitching is supposed to be their forte. That's supposed to be where they excel. And if for any reason that's going to start falling through, then they're going to be in some real trouble. But, the only reason they were even in that game, the great walk-off win on Sunday, was because of the bat of Juan Soto. And I think he's going to continue on a little bit of a tear here. And hopefully it coincides with the return of Kyle Schwarber.
Dave Preston, who, by the way, has his Nationals notebook on WTOP.com. That's every Tuesday, right?
It usually drops Monday morning, but we talk about it until Tuesday or Wednesday, sometimes until Friday, depending on what Sully from Southie thinks about his Sox, who are rather teetering, and it's wicked concerning to him. But I like the play of Alcides Escobar atop the order. It's amazing how Davey Martinez has been able to find back-to-back, maybe unconventional picks for the leadoff spot. And when you've got a guy up there who's able to get on base, which they did not have the first couple months of the season without putting Trey Turner in that spot, it gives guys like Trey Turner and Juan Soto guys on the base paths where they can then drive home. They get better pitches if there's somebody on the base paths. That's impressive. But Rob points out that pitching is paramount, and he's absolutely right. I think if you don't get Max Scherzer at maybe 70 to 80% peak performance, which we have had this season at times, you're going to be hurting. If you don't get Steven Strasburg at all, he's thrown just 21 innings so far this season. He threw 5 last year. That's 26.2 innings, and he's 21% of the way into this 7-year contract. You need more of return on that investment. Patrick Corbin needs to get back to the 2019 Corbin. He's shown little flashes of that this year, but he's shown a lot more flushes, if you know what we mean. Nice to see John Lester pitch well and then hit a home run Monday evening. We need more of that. And the Fetty has been inconsistent. The Eric Fetty that we've seen, same with Joe Ross. When we get to August, this team needs to be over 500 when they get to August. They're still under 500, and we're almost 60% of the way into the season. That is concerning. They do have 4 more games from Tuesday on. I guess 5 more games against last place teams. They need to win 4 or 5 of these games against the Marlins and the Orioles to be in good shape, because the schedule, even though they're not playing the team from California anymore, where they got butchered, 11 losses in 14 games, they need to start winning series consistently, get over 500, because the Mets and the Phillies have gotten hot too. Those teams aren't going to stay waiting for the Nats to catch up to them forever.
Yeah, and they caught a big break over the weekend because the Mets lost that series to the last place Pirates. So that was a break that they could not have accounted for. And so they didn't lose any ground in that race to catch the Mets. So they need to take advantage of that with a string together some wins here so that they can start to chip away at that 6-game deficit.
Gentlemen, I hate to run. The 12:15 calls, and then Ben and Jerry's will call after.
There we go.
Get up so that we can see the Ben and Jerry's.
And by the way, the fortunate thing is that 6-game deficit is, through all the craziness of the weekend, has stayed basically in that neighborhood. It can't get to 10 or 12, and then because it's so far back in the wild card, that's not worth the discussion, I don't think.
Right.
Chris, bring it home on the Nat stock.
The Nationals are who we think they are, as the late Dennis Green said. They lose most of their games to the better teams like San Diego and the Dodgers, and they're beating up on teams like the Marlins. And they had a nice win on Sunday, and after losing the first game of that doubleheader that was, caused by the tragic events of Saturday night. And I wonder, I was working that Saturday night. Scary incident, no doubt. You could hear the ringing of the shots in both the radio and the TV call. And I wonder if that's almost like, I don't know, I'm just speculating, but like a rallying call for this team. Like, this is sad that this is happening in our own stadium. And we need to show our community that we're strong. so that we have got people that don't feel afraid to come to the games. And it was still a great crowd the next day. I was really impressed to see that too, that our city wasn't shaken. But just as far as the on-field performance, Scherzer said it after he was selected to the All-Star game in his Zoom presser. He said, we need Steven Strasburg back. I mean, if he comes back, they have that 1-2 punch. I mean, he had the setback, though, so who knows when he's really coming back. And Patrick Corbin is not an established number 2. Now, if this team kind of keeps winning one, losing one, winning one, losing one, what do you do at the trade deadline? I'm sure they're having internal conversations about potentially trading Max Scherzer. He is a free agent after this year. You can get a massive haul for a guy like that. I don't know that they do it. My lean would be no, but if they have to start stringing together 2 out of 3 wins, 3 out of 4, 5 wins in a row, something like that. But the division is there for the taking. Mets losing DeGrom and Francisco Lindor. And who in this division are you really all that impressed with? I mean, the Braves are having massive issues too. Division's there. I don't see them being sellers, but it's not out of the question.
Final seconds, Rob Woodfork. Real quick, you've got your Olympics coming up. We're going to Olympic preview, right?
Yeah, this is the 3rd year, or the 3rd Olympics, in which I've done a series just spotlighting the local athletes privileged enough to go to the games. I did interview 2 people. I was able to catch up with actually 2 people that that I got the chance to interview in the past, and that is Farrah Hall out of Annapolis. She was a windsurfer, and Kat Holmes in fencing. I'll have stories on them on WTOP.com and on 103.5 FM. But also, we got word today that there are reports that they could pull the plug on the games altogether at the last minute because of the rising COVID rates in Japan. Hopefully that's not the case. Let's just all get vaccinated, please, so that we can get as close to normal as possible. It would really be a huge letdown if you postpone this a year, get everybody there, because trust and believe, the athletes are already in Tokyo right now. Get all the way there, pay all the money you did to train and all of that. And, for every swimming athlete or basketball athlete, the high profile athletes that you already know about, people like Farrah Hall in windsurfing, they have to fundraise in order to get there, in order to compete. So that would be a devastating thing for some of those sports that you don't necessarily pay as much attention to. So,
which, by the way, is most of them Olympic sports.
I mean, yes, statistically speaking, in terms of the volume of sports, absolutely. And there's a lot of water sports in the Washington area, far beyond swimming, and those are sort of generated through fundraising and other sources. So hopefully we are able to get these games off, and these athletes don't have to suffer the consequences of COVID once again raining on our parade.
Yeah, and I think vaccination obviously a good idea, because look, we've never been able to see COVID, and there's a place like Japan that I remember a year ago. They were actually having games with fans, baseball games, small numbers. I mean, obviously they canceled or postponed the Olympics, but there have been places that seem to be, I don't want to say COVID free, but it was not an issue, and then it becomes an issue. So it's still an issue.
The issue is the athletes themselves. It's not even necessarily the rates in Japan, as a country, because, in these interviews, speaking with Kat Holmes, for example, they're on a military base, a United States military base in Japan. They are completely isolated from the outside world. And so if rates are going up among athletes, that's where the problem is kind of coming into play. So hopefully this doesn't end up being the worst case scenario.
We'll keep it positive. We'll keep it positive thoughts. We appreciate everybody watching the WTOP Huddle. For Chris Cichon, who next week will have a complete shirt on, Rob Woodfork and Dave Preston. I'm Dave Johnson. Thanks for watching.
Break.